Have you ever fallen asleep to the chaotic sounds of Peter Griffin crashing through a wall or Stewie plotting world domination? Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre, twisted, and surprisingly intricate world of Family Guy lore that's somehow become the perfect background noise for millions of viewers worldwide. From the hidden connections between episodes that span decades to the dark secrets lurking beneath Quahog's surface, this is your ultimate guide to the Family Guy universe that will either help you drift off to dreamland or keep you wide awake, questioning everything you thought you knew about America's most dysfunctional animated family. Family Guy has been on our screens for over 2 decades now, and what started as a simple animated sitcom has evolved into something far more complex and layered than most people realize. Tonight we're going to explore the deep lore, the recurring mysteries, the character backstories that only dedicated fans know about, and all the subtle details that make this show a fascinating rabbit hole to fall down as you're trying to fall asleep. Let's start with the Griffin family themselves, because there's so much more to these characters than meets the eye. Peter Griffin isn't just a bumbling father figure. His backstory reveals a man shaped by abandonment, neglect, and a desperate need for acceptance that manifests in increasingly destructive ways. We learn throughout the series that Peter was adopted, never knowing his real father until much later in the show's run. This abandonment issue explains so much about his behavior, his need to be the center of attention, and his often childlike approach to solving problems. But here's where it gets interesting for our sleepy exploration. Peter's job history reads like a fever dream. He's worked at a toy factory, been a fisherman, worked at a brewery, become a bodyguard, tried his hand at being a country music star, worked as a private investigator, and somehow ended up back at the brewery multiple times. Each job change represents a different phase of the show's evolution, and if you're watching chronologically as you fall asleep, you can actually track the show's tonal shifts through Peter's career moves. Lois Griffin presents an even more fascinating character study for our nighttime viewing. She comes from the wealthy Pewterschmidt family, which immediately sets up this class conflict that runs throughout the entire series. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, represents old money, conservative values, and everything that Peter both despises and desperately wants to be accepted by. Lois chose Peter over her privileged background, but this choice haunts their relationship in subtle ways that become more apparent when you're watching with sleepy, unfocused attention. The really interesting lore element here is how Lois's musical background keeps surfacing throughout the series. She's classically trained, she's performed professionally, and there are hints that she gave up a potentially successful career to become a housewife and mother. These musical moments in the show often serve as brief respites from the chaos, making them perfect for viewers who are using the show to wind down. Now let's talk about Meg, because her character arc is actually one of the most complex and disturbing elements of the Family Guy universe. What starts as typical teenage awkwardness evolves into something much darker. The family's treatment of Meg goes beyond normal sibling rivalry or parental frustration. It becomes a systematic emotional abuse that the show initially played for laughs, but gradually reveals as genuinely harmful. The lore around Meg includes several episodes that suggest she's actually the most mentally stable and capable member of the family, which makes her treatment even more tragic. She's shown to be intelligent, talented, and capable of genuine empathy, qualities that the rest of the family either ignores or actively punishes. For viewers drifting off to sleep, Meg's storylines often provide a strange sort of comfort because they're usually quieter and more introspective than the main family chaos. Chris Griffin's character development follows a different trajectory entirely. While he's often dismissed as the dumb kid, the show's lore reveals that Chris has artistic talent, musical ability, and emotional intelligence that surpasses most of his family members. His relationship with his father is complicated by Peter's own insecurities about masculinity and success. Chris represents the possibility of breaking the cycle of dysfunction, which gives his character an underlying hopefulness that works well for bedtime viewing. But let's dive into the real star of Family Guy's complex lore, Stewie Griffin. This character has undergone one of the most dramatic evolutionary arcs in television history. He started as a genuinely evil baby bent on world domination and matricide, but gradually transformed into a complex character dealing with identity, sexuality, and belonging. The show never explicitly addresses this transformation, which creates this fascinating ambiguity about whether Stewie actually changed or whether we're just seeing different aspects of his personality. The time travel episodes featuring Stewie create some of the most intricate lore in the entire series. His future selves, his various timelines, and his technological capabilities suggest a level of intelligence and capability that extends far beyond what we see in regular episodes. These time travel storylines often involve quieter, more contemplative moments that are perfect for viewers who are trying to relax. Stewie's relationship with Brian creates another layer of lore that's perfect for our sleepy exploration. Their friendship transcends the typical pet-owner relationship and becomes something closer to intellectual partnership. They travel together, solve problems together, and engage in philosophical discussions that often serve as the show's more thoughtful moments. Their dynamic provides a consistent emotional anchor throughout the series' more chaotic elements. Speaking of Brian, his character lore is incredibly rich and often overlooked. He's not just a talking dog. He's a failed writer, a recovering alcoholic, a liberal intellectual, and someone struggling with depression and self-worth issues. His various romantic relationships throughout the series reveal someone desperately seeking validation and connection. His death and resurrection in later seasons created one of the most emotionally impactful storylines in the show's history, demonstrating how attached viewers had become to his character. The setting of Quahog itself deserves exploration in our lore deep dive. This fictional Rhode Island town has its own mythology, complete with local celebrities, recurring businesses, and a distinct culture. The Drunken Clam serves as a central gathering place where much of the show's male bonding and philosophical discussions occur. Mort Goldman's pharmacy, the local news station, and various other businesses create a sense of continuity and community that grounds the more absurd elements of the show. Cleveland's departure and return to the series creates interesting lore implications. His time in Virginia with his own spin-off show exists in the same universe, and references to his experiences there occasionally surface in Family Guy episodes. This interconnected universe concept adds depth for viewers who are familiar with both shows. Quagmire's character provides some of the darkest lore in the entire series. While often played for laughs, his behavior patterns suggest serious psychological issues and criminal tendencies. The show occasionally hints at a more complex backstory involving his father's gender transition, his military service, and his dysfunctional relationship patterns. These darker elements create an interesting contrast with his seemingly cheerful demeanor. Joe Swanson's backstory as a disabled police officer adds another layer of complexity to the Quahog community. His accident, his marriage to Bonnie, and his struggle to maintain his sense of purpose and masculinity after becoming paralyzed provide some of the show's more serious emotional content. His friendship with Peter, Cleveland, and Quagmire often explores themes of loyalty, acceptance, and adaptation that work well for contemplative viewing. The show's cutaway gags, while seemingly random, actually create their own form of lore through recurring characters and situations. Conway Twitty appearances, the various historical figures Peter claims to have interacted with, and the recurring joke characters all contribute to the show's internal mythology. These cutaways often provide brief mental breaks that can be soothing for viewers trying to wind down. Family Guy's approach to continuity is deliberately loose, which actually makes it perfect for casual viewing. Unlike serialized dramas that require intense attention to plot details, Family Guy episodes can be enjoyed independently while still rewarding longtime viewers with references and callbacks. This makes it ideal for background viewing or for times when you're not paying complete attention. The show's musical numbers deserve special mention in our lore exploration. From Conway Twitty performances to elaborate Broadway-style productions, these musical interludes often serve as the show's most memorable and emotionally resonant moments. They break up the rapid-fire joke delivery and provide opportunities for character development and emotional expression. The various holiday episodes throughout the series create their own seasonal lore. Christmas episodes often explore themes of family, tradition, and redemption. Halloween episodes venture into horror and supernatural territory. These special episodes often feature higher production values and more elaborate storytelling that reward dedicated viewing. The show's treatment of religion, politics, and social issues creates ongoing lore threads that reflect changing social attitudes over the show's long run. Early episodes approach these topics differently than later ones, creating an interesting timeline of cultural evolution that can be tracked through the series' progression. Guest appearances and celebrity encounters in Family Guy often become part of the show's lore through recurring references and callbacks. These celebrity interactions sometimes extend beyond single episodes, creating ongoing relationships and references that reward longtime viewers. The various alternate reality and parallel universe episodes explore different versions of the Griffin family and Quahog community. These episodes often reveal character depths and relationship dynamics that aren't apparent in regular episodes. They also provide opportunities to explore what-if scenarios that add complexity to our understanding of the main characters. Family Guy's animation style evolution tells its own story about the show's development and budget changes over time. Early episodes have a distinctly different look and feel compared to more recent ones. This visual evolution creates a subtle timeline that longtime viewers can use to place episodes chronologically, even without checking air dates. The show's relationship with Fox Network, including its cancellation and resurrection, becomes part of its own metalore. Episodes that reference these real-world events blur the line between fiction and reality in ways that add extra layers for dedicated fans to discover and contemplate. As we wind down our exploration of Family Guy's rich lore landscape, it's worth noting that this depth and complexity is part of what makes the show so suitable for repeated viewing and background watching. There's always another layer to discover, another connection to make, another character detail to notice. Whether you're actively watching or letting it play, while you drift off to sleep, Family Guy's universe provides a consistent, familiar, and surprisingly deep world to explore. The beauty of Family Guy lore for bedtime viewing lies in its perfect balance of familiarity and discovery. You can watch episodes you've seen dozens of times and still notice new details, catch references you missed before, or simply let the familiar voices and situations wash over you as you relax. The show's episodic nature means you won't lose important plot threads if you fall asleep mid-episode, but its rich lore rewards those moments when you find yourself unexpectedly engaged and alert. Sweet dreams, and remember that somewhere in Quahog, Peter Griffin is probably about to do something that will somehow make perfect sense within the wonderfully chaotic universe that has been entertaining us for over 2 decades. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled twice by Fox and nearly became lost media forever? Or that Seth MacFarlane almost died in the September 11th attacks but missed his flight because of a hangover? Welcome to the bizarre, twisted, and absolutely fascinating world of Family Guy lore that most fans have never heard about. I'm talking about secrets so wild that they make the show's most outrageous episodes look tame by comparison. We're diving deep into the creation myths, the behind-the-scenes drama, the near-death experiences, and the corporate battles that shaped one of television's most controversial animated series. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never watch Family Guy the same way again. Let's start with something that will blow your mind. Seth MacFarlane, the creator and voice of Peter Griffin, Brian, and Stewie, was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 1-1 on September 11th, 2001. That's right. The same flight that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. But here's the crazy part. He overslept because he was hungover from a party the night before and his travel agent had given him the wrong departure time. If he had made that flight, Family Guy would never have existed beyond its first season, and animation history would be completely different. But that's just the beginning of this incredible story. Family Guy has one of the most bizarre resurrection tales in television history. The show premiered in 1999 and was actually performing decently in the ratings, but Fox kept moving it around to different time slots. You know how networks love to do that, right? Well, they moved it so many times that viewers couldn't keep track of when it was on. Eventually, Fox canceled it in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Here's where it gets interesting, though. While the show was dead on television, something magical was happening in the afterlife. Adult Swim picked up the syndication rights and started airing reruns late at night. College students and young adults discovered the show and fell in love with it. At the same time, DVD sales were going through the roof. The first season DVD became one of the best-selling TV show DVDs of all time, and suddenly Fox realized they had made a massive mistake. So in 2005, Fox did something almost unprecedented in television history. They brought back a canceled show based purely on DVD sales and cable reruns. Family Guy became the first show ever to be revived solely because of its success in syndication and home video. It was like watching a TV show literally rise from the dead. But the resurrection story gets even weirder. When Fox brought the show back, they didn't just order a few episodes to test the waters. They ordered 53 new episodes right off the bat. That's an enormous vote of confidence for a show that had already been canceled once. Seth MacFarlane suddenly went from unemployed animator to one of the most powerful people in Hollywood practically overnight. Now let's talk about the creative origins of the show, because they're absolutely fascinating. Seth MacFarlane created Family Guy when he was just 24 years old, fresh out of the Rhode Island School of Design. But here's what most people don't know. The show was originally pitched as a much more traditional family sitcom. The early concepts were way more grounded and realistic than what we ended up with. The character of Peter Griffin was originally going to be much more like a typical TV dad, still bumbling and overweight, but not the complete psychopath we know and love today. Stewie wasn't even going to be particularly smart or evil in the original concept. He was just going to be a regular baby with maybe slightly advanced vocabulary. Brian was going to be a normal dog who occasionally made witty observations but wasn't going to be a full conversation partner for the family. What changed everything was Seth MacFarlane's love of old Hollywood and classic animation. He grew up watching Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, and classic Disney cartoons, and he wanted to bring that level of visual comedy and surreal humor to primetime television. The problem was that most networks were terrified of anything too weird or experimental. Fox, however, was in a unique position in the late 90s. The Simpsons had proven that animated shows could work in prime time, but Fox was still considered the edgy, rebellious network. They were willing to take risks that ABC, CBS, and NBC would never consider. So when Seth pitched his cartoon about a dysfunctional family in Rhode Island, Fox was intrigued enough to order a pilot. The pilot episode is actually incredibly different from the show we know today. The animation style was cruder, the jokes were more straightforward, and the characters hadn't yet developed their extreme personalities. If you watch that original pilot, you can barely recognize it as the same show. It's like looking at baby photos of a celebrity. You can kind of see the resemblance, but it's clearly a work in progress. One of the most fascinating aspects of Family Guy's development is how the characters evolved over time. Take Stewie, for example. In the early seasons, he was genuinely trying to kill Lois and take over the world. His evil schemes were the driving force behind many episodes. But as the show went on, the writers realized that Stewie was funnier when he was dealing with more relatable problems, like sexuality, relationships, and growing up. This evolution wasn't accidental. It reflected Seth MacFarlane's own growth as a writer and person. When he created Stewie, MacFarlane was a young, single guy who thought evil baby plots were hilarious. But as he got older and more experienced, he realized that character-driven comedy was more sustainable than pure shock value. The same thing happened with Brian. Originally, he was just the voice of reason in the Griffin household, the one sane character who could comment on everyone else's craziness. But over time, the writers started exploring Brian's flaws and insecurities, turning him into one of the most complex characters on television. His pretentiousness, his failed writing career, his drinking problem, all of these traits developed organically as the show matured. Speaking of character development, let's talk about some of the inspiration behind the Griffin family. Peter Griffin was actually based on a security guard that Seth MacFarlane worked with during a summer job. The guy was loud, obnoxious, and completely inappropriate, but somehow lovable at the same time. MacFarlane found himself fascinated by how someone could be so offensive, yet still maintain friendships and a family. Lois was inspired by MacFarlane's own mother, but also by the classic TV mom archetype. The twist was making her come from a wealthy family, which allowed the writers to explore themes of class and privilege. It also gave them an excuse to put the Griffins in situations they normally couldn't afford, like fancy parties and expensive vacations. The supporting characters have equally interesting origins. Glenn Quagmire was originally supposed to be a minor character who appeared in maybe 1 or 2 episodes. But Seth MacFarlane's voice performance was so distinctive and memorable that the writers kept bringing him back. The giggity giggity catchphrase wasn't even scripted. MacFarlane improvised it during recording, and everyone thought it was so funny that they made it Quagmire's signature sound. Cleveland Brown started as a simple background character, but MacFarlane realized that having a calm, reasonable neighbor made Peter's craziness even funnier by contrast. The character became so popular that he eventually got his own spin-off show, though that's a whole other story of corporate politics and creative struggles. One of the most controversial aspects of Family Guy is its use of cutaway gags, those random flashbacks that have nothing to do with the main plot. Some critics hate them, calling them lazy writing and cheap laughs. But here's the thing. Those cutaways were actually inspired by some of the most sophisticated comedy ever created. Seth MacFarlane grew up watching Monty Python's Flying Circus, and he was fascinated by how the Pythons would interrupt their sketches with completely random animations and non sequiturs. He also loved the Marx Brothers movies, where the plot would screech to a halt for a musical number or a bizarre comedy bit that had nothing to do with anything else. The cutaway gags serve a specific purpose in Family Guy's comedy structure. They allow the writers to do jokes that would be impossible within the constraints of a normal sitcom plot. Want to make fun of a celebrity or reference an obscure movie? Just have Peter say, "This reminds me of the time I," and cut to whatever crazy scenario you can imagine. But here's something most fans don't realize. Many of those cutaways are actually incredibly expensive to produce. Each one requires new character designs, new backgrounds, new voice acting, and sometimes even new music. A single 30-second cutaway can cost more to animate than an entire scene of regular dialogue. Fox executives were initially horrified by how much money the show was spending on these seemingly throwaway jokes. The financial aspect of Family Guy is actually one of the most interesting parts of its story. When the show first premiered, animation was still considered a niche market for adults. The Simpsons was successful, but it was seen as a unique exception rather than proof that there was a broader market for animated comedy. Family Guy's success helped prove that there was actually a huge appetite for adult animated shows. This paved the way for series like American Dad, The Cleveland Show, Archer, Rick and Morty, and countless others. Without Family Guy's commercial success, the entire landscape of adult animation might look completely different today. The merchandising aspect is equally fascinating. Family Guy products generate hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue every year. T-shirts, toys, video games, Christmas ornaments, you name it, and there's probably a Family Guy version of it. The Stewie character alone has spawned an entire industry of baby-themed merchandise with surprisingly dark humor. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of Family Guy's cultural impact is how it changed the way we think about offensive comedy. The show pushes boundaries that would have been unthinkable on television even 10 years before it premiered. Yet somehow, it manages to get away with jokes that would destroy other shows. The secret is in the show's self-awareness. Family Guy knows that it's offensive, and it's constantly making jokes about its own offensiveness. When Peter does something terrible, the other characters usually call him out on it. When the show makes a controversial reference, it often follows it up with a joke about how inappropriate the reference was. This meta-humor creates a kind of protective bubble around the show's more controversial content. Viewers understand that they're not supposed to take Peter Griffin seriously as a role model. He's clearly meant to be a cautionary tale about what happens when someone has no filter and no self-awareness. The voice acting on Family Guy deserves its own deep dive because it's honestly incredible. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 of the main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire, plus dozens of supporting characters and celebrity impersonations. His range is absolutely mind-blowing when you really think about it. But here's what's even more impressive. MacFarlane often records conversations between his own characters. That means he's essentially having entire dramatic scenes with himself, switching between voices and maintaining the emotional continuity of multiple characters simultaneously. It's like watching a one-man theater performance every time you see Peter and Brian have a heart-to-heart conversation. The other voice actors are equally talented. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois, also does dozens of supporting characters, including the Griffin's maid Consuela. Mila Kunis took over the voice of Meg after the first season, and her performance evolved from simple teenager dialogue to some of the show's most emotionally complex moments. Seth Green voices Chris Griffin, and his portrayal perfectly captures that awkward teenage energy. Green actually ad-libs a lot of Chris's dialogue, particularly the character's weird sound effects and random observations. Many of Chris's funniest moments come from Green just improvising during recording sessions. The show's relationship with Fox has always been complicated and fascinating. On one hand, Family Guy makes enormous amounts of money for the network. On the other hand, it constantly creates controversy and pushes the boundaries of what's acceptable on broadcast television. There have been numerous instances where Fox executives have asked the writers to tone down certain jokes or storylines. Sometimes the writers comply, but often they find creative ways to work around the censorship. This has led to some incredibly clever wordplay and visual innuendo that's actually funnier than whatever the original joke was going to be. The international success of Family Guy is another interesting chapter in its story. The show airs in dozens of countries around the world, and each market has its own unique censorship challenges. Some countries cut entire scenes, while others dub over offensive dialogue with completely different jokes. In some markets, Stewie's sexuality is completely removed from his character arc. In others, references to religion or politics are heavily edited. This has created dozens of different versions of the show, each tailored to local sensitivities and cultural norms. Looking at Family Guy's legacy today, it's clear that the show fundamentally changed television comedy. It proved that audiences were hungry for more experimental, boundary-pushing content. It showed that animation could be a vehicle for sophisticated adult humor, not just children's entertainment. The show also pioneered many techniques that are now standard in comedy writing. The use of pop culture references as comedic shorthand, the mixing of high and low culture, the willingness to completely abandon plot for the sake of a good joke. These are all techniques that you can see in countless comedies today. But perhaps most importantly, Family Guy proved that television shows could have multiple lives. The fact that it survived cancellation and came back stronger than ever showed other creators that there were new paths to success beyond traditional network approval. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy lore, it's worth noting that the show is still evolving and changing. Seth MacFarlane has stepped back from day-to-day involvement to focus on other projects, but the show continues under new leadership. Each season brings new controversies, new characters, and new ways to push the boundaries of what's possible on television. Whether you love it or hate it, Family Guy has left an indelible mark on popular culture. It's a show that dared to be different, survived multiple attempts to kill it, and emerged as one of the most successful and influential comedies of the modern era. And honestly, that's pretty giggity if you ask me. Picture this. You're lying in bed, eyes heavy, ready to drift off to sleep, but your mind is still buzzing. Maybe you need something to help you unwind, something familiar and comforting that won't keep you too engaged. Well, tonight we're diving into the weird and wonderful world of Family Guy, with some absolutely wild facts that might just be the perfect bedtime companion. These aren't your typical trivia tidbits. We're talking about the kind of behind-the-scenes secrets and bizarre details that make this show the cultural phenomenon it became. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind right away. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice? Yeah, you heard that right. The show got the axe in 2002 after just 3 seasons, then came back in 2005, only to get canceled again in 2007. But here's where it gets interesting. The show's resurrection wasn't because of some executive's change of heart or a passionate fan campaign, though those things helped. It was actually because of DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim that proved the show had a massive audience that networks had completely missed. The numbers were staggering. When Fox looked at the DVD sales figures, they realized they'd made a colossal mistake. The first season DVD became one of the best-selling TV show DVDs of all time, moving over 1 million copies in its first year. Adult Swim was paying Fox millions for the rerun rights, and the ratings were through the roof. It was like discovering you'd thrown away a winning lottery ticket, except you could still fish it out of the trash. But here's something even weirder about the show's cancellation drama. Seth MacFarlane, the creator, was actually somewhat relieved when it got canceled the first time. He was completely burned out from working insane hours, writing, voice acting, and overseeing every aspect of production. The guy was doing the voices for 3 main characters while running the entire show. When Fox pulled the plug, he thought his animation career might be over, but he also felt like he could finally breathe again. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, here's a fact that'll keep you up at night thinking about alternate timelines. He was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11th, 2001, the flight that hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center. He missed it because his travel agent gave him the wrong departure time, and he showed up to the gate 10 minutes after boarding had ended. He was hungover from partying the night before and almost didn't go to the airport at all. That single hangover and miscommunication might have changed television history forever. Now let's talk about something that'll make you appreciate the show's attention to detail. Every single Conway Twitty cutaway gag. You know those random moments where the show just cuts to the country singer performing for what feels like an eternity? Those weren't just random filler. They were actually Seth MacFarlane's way of trolling both the network and the audience. He knew these segments would drive people absolutely crazy, but he also knew they couldn't be cut because they were integral to reaching the episode's required runtime. The Conway Twitty thing became such a phenomenon that it spawned its own internal mythology at the show. Writers would pitch entire episodes around how they could work in a Conway Twitty segment. They'd sit in the writer's room timing these segments down to the second, calculating exactly how much actual story content they could replace with a dead country singer performing on stage. It was comedic genius disguised as laziness. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's voice acting. You know how Brian the dog sounds so sophisticated and intellectual? Well, Seth MacFarlane based that voice on his own natural speaking voice, but slightly more pretentious. He said in interviews that Brian represents the version of himself he'd be if he let his college education go to his head. The character became a way for MacFarlane to explore his own intellectual insecurities and liberal political views through a talking dog. But the really fascinating part is how the other voice actors developed their characters. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois, originally auditioned for a completely different character on a different show MacFarlane was developing. When that project fell through, he remembered her voice and wrote Lois specifically for her. The character's Long Island accent and particular speech patterns are actually based on Borstein's own family members. Seth Green, who voices Chris, has admitted that he sometimes forgets he's supposed to be playing a teenager. He said the character's voice just comes naturally to him because it's basically his own voice from when he was going through puberty, which apparently lasted well into his 20s. The character's dim-witted but lovable personality evolved because Green kept improvising lines that made the writers laugh during recording sessions. Now here's a production fact that'll make you realize how much work goes into seemingly simple animation. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 8 to 9 months to produce, from script to final broadcast. The writing process alone can take several months, with jokes being written, rewritten, and completely scrapped dozens of times. Then there's the voice recording, which happens in multiple sessions as scripts get revised. The animation process is where things get really wild. Every single frame has to be drawn by hand, even though the show uses computer software to assist with the process. A single 22-minute episode contains roughly 16,000 individual drawings. When you think about the fact that the show has produced over 400 episodes, that's literally millions of individual drawings that have brought these characters to life. But here's something that'll make you appreciate the show's cultural impact even more. Family Guy popularized the random cutaway gag format that's now become standard in animated comedy. Before Family Guy, most animated shows followed more traditional narrative structures. The show's willingness to completely abandon the main plot for a 30-second historical recreation or pop culture reference changed how comedy writers think about pacing and attention spans. The cutaway gags themselves have become a cultural phenomenon. There are entire YouTube channels dedicated to compiling them, and they've been referenced and parodied by countless other shows. But here's what's really interesting. The writers have admitted that sometimes they write the cutaway gag first, then build an entire episode around finding a way to naturally lead into it. Let's talk about something that might disturb your peaceful drift toward sleep, the show's relationship with censorship. Family Guy has been censored, banned, and protested more than almost any other primetime animated series. The Parents Television Council has named it the worst show on television multiple times. But here's the thing. All that controversy has only made the show more popular. The censorship battles have led to some genuinely creative solutions from the writers. When they can't say certain words or show certain images, they find increasingly elaborate ways to imply them. Some of the show's funniest moments have come from these creative workarounds. It's like watching a comedian perform with their hands tied behind their back, and somehow becoming even funnier because of the constraint. Here's a fact about the show's music that might surprise you. Seth MacFarlane is actually a classically trained vocalist who's released several albums of standards and jazz music. His musical background heavily influences the show's frequent musical numbers and elaborate song and dance sequences. Those aren't just random additions. They're MacFarlane showing off skills he developed long before he ever got into animation. The musical episodes of Family Guy often take months of additional preparation because they require completely different animation techniques, additional voice coaching for the actors, and original orchestral arrangements. The Blue Harvest Star Wars parody episodes alone required hiring an entire orchestra to record new versions of John Williams' iconic themes. Now, let's dive into something that'll make you think about celebrity culture differently. The show's celebrity cameos and parodies have occasionally led to real-world consequences for the celebrities involved. Some stars have embraced being mocked on the show, treating it as a badge of honor. Others have publicly complained or even threatened legal action. But here's what's really fascinating. Some celebrities have specifically requested to be made fun of on Family Guy because they know it'll keep them relevant in pop culture. The show has become such a cultural touchstone that being parodied on it is almost like being inducted into a Hall of Fame of American entertainment figures. The writers have developed an entire system for deciding which celebrities to target. They consider factors like current relevance, comedic potential, and likelihood of legal retaliation. There's literally a legal department that reviews every celebrity reference to make sure the show won't get sued into oblivion. Here's something about the show's international appeal that might keep your mind wandering as you fall asleep. Family Guy airs in over 100 countries, but many episodes have to be heavily edited or completely banned in certain regions due to cultural sensitivities or government censorship. The writers have become experts at predicting which jokes will translate across cultures and which ones will get the show pulled off the air in entire countries. The international dubbing process is particularly fascinating. Voice actors in different countries have to capture not just the literal translations of the jokes, but also the timing, delivery, and cultural references that make the humor work. Sometimes entire scenes have to be rewritten for different markets, with completely different jokes that serve the same narrative function. Speaking of narrative function, here's something about the show's storytelling that might surprise you. Despite its reputation for random, stream-of-consciousness humor, every episode follows extremely strict structural guidelines. The writers use a detailed formula for pacing, character development, and plot progression that's remained virtually unchanged since the show's early seasons. The formula is so precise that new writers go through extensive training to learn it. They practice writing sample episodes that hit specific comedic beats at exact timing intervals. It's like learning to write music in a very particular key and tempo. There's way more technical skill involved than most viewers realize. Here's a production detail that'll make you appreciate the voice actors even more. Most of the main voice cast records their lines together in the same studio, which is actually unusual for animated shows. Many animated series record each actor separately for scheduling convenience. But Family Guy's ensemble cast has developed such strong chemistry that they actually improvise and play off each other during recording sessions. These improvisation sessions have led to some of the show's most memorable moments. Jokes that weren't in the original script, character interactions that reveal new personality traits, and entire comedic sequences that grew out of the actors just goofing around in the studio. The writers have learned to leave space in their scripts for this kind of spontaneous creativity. The show's relationship with current events is another fascinating aspect of its production. Episodes are produced so far in advance that writers have to predict what will be culturally relevant 8 to 9 months in the future. They've developed an almost supernatural ability to anticipate which celebrities will still be famous, which political issues will still matter, and which pop culture references will still be funny by the time episodes air. Sometimes they get it spectacularly wrong, leading to episodes that reference celebrities who've completely disappeared from public consciousness, or make jokes about events that ended up being resolved in completely different ways. These temporal mismatches have become part of the show's charm, creating accidental time capsules of what people were thinking about during specific periods. Here's something about the show's merchandise empire that might occupy your thoughts as you drift off. Family Guy generates hundreds of millions of dollars in merchandise sales annually, from t-shirts and mugs to video games and Halloween costumes. The licensing department has to approve thousands of product designs, ensuring that everything maintains the show's comedic voice while being commercially viable. The most successful merchandise items are often the most random ones. Stewie's football head design became a best-selling plush toy. Brian's martini glass became a popular bar accessory. Peter's chicken fight with Ernie became an entire line of action figures. These products have introduced the show to audiences who might never watch it on television. As we wind down our journey through the bizarre world of Family Guy facts, here's one last thing to ponder as you close your eyes. The show has fundamentally changed how we consume comedy. It's trained an entire generation of viewers to expect rapid-fire jokes, constant pop culture references, and narrative structures that can pivot in completely unexpected directions at any moment. This influence extends far beyond television. You can see Family Guy's impact in internet memes, social media humor, and even in how people tell stories in everyday conversation. The show's cutaway gag structure has become a template for how we process and share information in the digital age. Those random tangents and seemingly unrelated references? They're everywhere now, from Twitter threads to TikTok videos. The show created a new language of comedy that's become so pervasive we barely notice it anymore. When someone starts telling a story, then suddenly pivots to a completely unrelated memory that somehow connects back to the original point, they're unconsciously using a Family Guy narrative structure. When someone makes a reference to an obscure piece of pop culture from decades ago to explain something happening today, they're speaking fluent Family Guy. So there you have it. As you drift off to sleep tonight, you can rest easy, knowing that somewhere in the world, animators are drawing thousands of individual frames to bring new episodes to life. Voice actors are improvising lines that will make millions of people laugh, and writers are crafting jokes that will still be quoted years from now. The strange, wonderful, chaotic world of Family Guy continues to evolve, one random cutaway gag at a time. Sweet dreams. And remember, if you find yourself having weird dreams about talking dogs, evil babies, or inexplicably long Conway Twitty performances, you'll know exactly where those images came from. The show that changed comedy forever has probably infiltrated your subconscious too, joining the ranks of viewers who've been shaped by its unique brand of organized chaos. Hey there, night owls and Family Guy fanatics. If you're scrolling through YouTube at 3 in the morning looking for something to help you drift off to dreamland, you've stumbled upon the perfect video. Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre, hilarious, and sometimes completely unhinged world of Family Guy with some truly wild facts that'll either lull you to sleep or keep you wide awake wondering how Seth MacFarlane's mind actually works. So grab your favorite blanket, dim those lights, and let's explore the wonderfully weird universe of Quahog, Rhode Island. Trust me, by the end of this journey through Family Guy's most fascinating secrets, you'll either be peacefully snoozing or have a whole new appreciation for just how crazy this show really gets. Let's start with something that might blow your mind. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice? Yeah, you heard that right. The show first got the axe in 2002 after just 3 seasons, and Fox thought they were done with the Griffin family forever. But here's where it gets interesting. The show found new life through DVD sales and reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block. The ratings were so incredible that Fox literally had to eat humble pie and bring the show back in 2005. Then, believe it or not, they canceled it again in 2007, only to reverse that decision just months later. Talk about a roller coaster relationship between a network and a show. Speaking of relationships, let's talk about the voice behind our favorite talking baby, Stewie Griffin. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just voice Stewie, he also voices Brian, Peter, Glenn Quagmire, and several other characters. But here's the kicker. MacFarlane based Stewie's voice on the accent of English actor Rex Harrison, who you might know from the classic musical My Fair Lady. Yeah, that sophisticated, slightly pompous British accent that makes Stewie sound like an evil mastermind. It's straight from a Broadway legend. MacFarlane has said in interviews that he wanted Stewie to sound like an old-school English gentleman, which makes it even funnier when this supposedly refined character is plotting world domination from his crib. Now, If you think the show pushes boundaries on television, you should hear about some of the stuff that never made it to air. The writers and animators have created countless scenes, jokes, and entire storylines that were deemed too controversial even for Family Guy's standards. And considering what does make it onto television, that's really saying something. There's apparently an entire vault of unused content that could probably fill several seasons worth of episodes. Some of these rejected bits have made their way onto DVD releases as deleted scenes, but many remain locked away forever, too wild even for the show known for having no limits. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's production process. Unlike many animated series that plan out entire seasons in advance, Family Guy often operates more like a live-action sitcom. The writers frequently come up with ideas on the spot, and episodes are sometimes completely rewritten just weeks before they're supposed to air. This spontaneous approach explains why the show can feel so fresh and unpredictable, but it also leads to some pretty intense crunch times for the animation team. Imagine trying to animate complex scenes with just days to spare before broadcast. Let's dive into some character secrets that most fans never realize. Brian the dog, everyone's favorite intellectual canine, was originally supposed to be just a regular pet. In the original concept, Brian was going to be a typical dog who couldn't talk and would just bark and fetch like any normal household pet. Seth MacFarlane decided to make him a talking character at the last minute, and thank goodness he did, because Brian's philosophical conversations and sarcastic wit have become some of the show's most memorable moments. It's wild to think that one of the most complex characters almost didn't have a voice at all. The show's animation style has some fascinating secrets too. Those seemingly simple character designs actually take an enormous amount of work to create. Each character has hundreds of different facial expressions and poses that animators can mix and match. Stewie alone has over 300 different mouth positions just for speaking different sounds. The animators have to keep track of all these variations to maintain consistency across episodes. It's like having a massive digital puppet show where every single movement has to be carefully orchestrated. Here's a fact that might make you appreciate the show's music even more. Seth MacFarlane isn't just the creator, writer, and voice actor for multiple characters. He's also a legitimate recording artist who's released several albums of traditional pop standards. His musical background heavily influences the show, which is why you'll notice that Family Guy has more musical numbers than most animated comedies. Those elaborate song and dance sequences aren't just thrown in for laughs. They're crafted by someone who genuinely understands musical theater and classic American songbook traditions. The show's cultural impact goes way beyond just entertainment. Family Guy has actually influenced real-world events and conversations. Politicians have referenced the show in speeches. Academics have written scholarly papers about its social commentary, and it's been credited with introducing younger audiences to cultural references they might never have encountered otherwise. Think about how many classic movies, TV shows, songs, and historical events you first learned about through a Family Guy cutaway gag. The show serves as this weird cultural bridge between different generations of entertainment. Now let's talk about some of the show's most controversial episodes and why they're so memorable. The writers have never shied away from tackling sensitive subjects, and sometimes their approach has sparked genuine debates about comedy, censorship, and social responsibility. Some episodes have been pulled from rotation, others have been edited for different markets, and a few have become legendary among fans, specifically because they pushed things too far. This willingness to court controversy has kept Family Guy relevant for over 2 decades, even as television landscape has changed dramatically around it. The voice acting process for Family Guy is unlike anything you'd expect. Seth MacFarlane often records multiple characters in the same session, essentially having conversations with himself. He'll record Peter's lines, then immediately switch to Brian's voice to respond, then jump to Stewie for the next exchange. Watching him work in the recording booth is apparently like witnessing someone with multiple personality disorder having a very organized conversation with themselves. Other voice actors have said it's both impressive and slightly unsettling to watch. Here's something that connects to the show's longevity. Family Guy has aired over 400 episodes, making it one of the longest-running animated series in television history. To put that in perspective, if you watched every single episode back-to-back, you'd be sitting there for more than 150 hours straight. That's almost a full week of continuous Family Guy content. The show has literally created enough material to entertain someone for an entire week without sleeping, eating, or taking a single break. The show's international versions reveal some fascinating cultural differences. Family Guy is broadcast in dozens of countries, and each version has to navigate different censorship standards and cultural sensitivities. In some countries, entire jokes are replaced with completely different content. In others, characters' names are changed, and certain running gags are modified to make sense to local audiences. There are versions of Family Guy where the cultural references are so different that they're essentially completely different shows with the same characters. Let's explore some behind-the-scenes drama that most fans never hear about. Like any long-running show, Family Guy has had its share of creative disagreements, contract disputes, and personality conflicts. Seth MacFarlane has been very public about his occasional frustrations with the show, even stepping back from day-to-day involvement for several seasons. There have been disputes over storylines, character development, and the general direction of the show. Some former writers and voice actors have shared stories about heated arguments in writers' rooms and recording sessions that had to be stopped because of creative differences. The show's merchandising empire is absolutely massive, but some of the most interesting products never made it to market. There have been proposed Family Guy video games, theme park attractions, and even a planned Broadway musical that would have featured the Griffin family in live-action musical theater. The legal and logistical challenges of adapting animated characters for different mediums have killed dozens of potential projects over the years. Imagine walking through a Family Guy theme park, or watching actors in Peter and Lois costumes singing on Broadway. Here's a production secret that reveals how much work goes into each episode. A single 22-minute episode of Family Guy requires approximately 8 months to complete from initial concept to final broadcast. The process involves dozens of writers, voice actors, animators, sound engineers, and editors. Every single frame is reviewed multiple times. Every joke is analyzed and often rewritten. And every visual gag is carefully planned and executed. What looks like simple animation on screen represents thousands of hours of collaborative creative work. The show's relationship with censorship has created some legendary stories. There are episodes that exist in multiple versions, with different levels of content depending on when and where they're broadcast. The uncensored DVD versions of some episodes contain jokes and scenes that have never been seen on television. Meanwhile, daytime reruns are edited so heavily that some episodes are barely recognizable. The writers have learned to create content in layers, knowing that different versions will need different levels of editing for different audiences. Family Guy's influence on internet culture deserves its own discussion. The show has generated countless memes, viral videos, and online discussions. Certain episodes have become legendary specifically because of how they're shared and referenced online. The show's cutaway gag format translates perfectly to social media, where short, punchy jokes can be easily shared and remixed. Some Family Guy moments have become more famous as internet memes than they ever were as television content. The voice acting talent that has appeared on Family Guy reads like a who's who of entertainment. Celebrities often jump at the chance to appear on the show, sometimes playing themselves, sometimes voicing original characters. The guest star list includes everyone from major Hollywood actors to political figures to professional athletes. Some celebrities have become recurring characters, while others have appeared just once but created memorable moments that fans still talk about years later. Here's something that might change how you watch the show. Many of the seemingly random cutaway gags are actually carefully constructed references to specific movies, TV shows, or historical events. The writers spend considerable time researching these references to make sure they're accurate, even when they're being completely absurd. There are entire databases that catalog every cultural reference in every episode, and the depth of knowledge required to understand all the jokes is honestly staggering. The show's animation has evolved significantly over its run, but not always in ways you might expect. While the overall character designs have remained consistent, the background art, lighting effects, and scene composition have become much more sophisticated. Early episodes look almost primitive compared to recent ones, but the evolution has been so gradual that most viewers don't notice. Comparing the pilot episode to current episodes is like looking at completely different shows that happen to use the same characters. Family Guy's impact on other animated shows cannot be overstated. The success of Family Guy paved the way for countless other adult animated comedies, from American Dad to Rick and Morty to BoJack Horseman. The show proved that animated comedies could tackle adult themes and attract mature audiences, opening up an entire genre that barely existed before. Many current animators and writers cite Family Guy as a direct influence on their work and career choices. The show's approach to storytelling often breaks conventional narrative rules in fascinating ways. Episodes frequently abandon their main plots entirely for extended tangents. Characters regularly break the fourth wall to address the audience directly, and the show often parodies its own format and conventions. This meta approach to comedy requires a level of self-awareness that's rare in television, and it's part of what keeps longtime fans engaged, even after hundreds of episodes. As we wind down this journey through Family Guy's hidden world, it's worth reflecting on how a cartoon about a dysfunctional family in Rhode Island became such a cultural phenomenon. The show succeeds because it taps into something fundamentally human about finding humor in chaos, about laughing at things that probably shouldn't be funny, and about the strange comfort of familiar characters behaving in completely unpredictable ways. Whether you're drifting off to sleep or wide awake thinking about animated comedy theory, Family Guy continues to surprise, offend, entertain, and occasionally enlighten its audience after more than 20 years on the air. The show's ability to constantly reinvent itself while maintaining its core identity is perhaps the most impressive fact of all. Sweet dreams, and remember, somewhere in Quahog, the Griffin family is probably getting into trouble that's even weirder than anything we've discussed tonight. The chaos never really stops. And somehow, that's exactly what makes it so perfect for helping restless minds finally find peace. Until next time, sleep tight and don't let the giant chicken nightmares bite. Picture this. It's 2 a.m. You're exhausted, but somehow still scrolling through YouTube. And suddenly you stumble across a Family Guy compilation that's supposed to help you sleep. Sounds weird, right? Well, you're not alone. Millions of people have discovered that this chaotic animated sitcom has become the ultimate sleep aid. And today we're diving deep into the fascinating world of Family Guy sleep culture and uncovering some mind-blowing facts that'll change how you think about this phenomenon forever. Before we get started, let me ask you something. Have you ever found yourself drifting off to the sounds of Peter Griffin's ridiculous antics? If so, you're part of a massive community that's turned what was meant to be comedy gold into the perfect bedtime soundtrack. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why this works so well and discover some incredible secrets about the show that even die-hard fans don't know. Let's start with the most surprising fact of all. Family Guy wasn't designed to be relaxing, yet it's become one of the most popular sleep aids on the internet. The reason behind this paradox is actually rooted in psychology. Our brains crave familiar patterns when we're trying to wind down. And after more than 2 decades on air, Family Guy has created a predictable rhythm that viewers find comforting. The show's structure follows a specific formula that makes it perfect for background noise. Each episode contains multiple short segments, cutaway gags that last just long enough to capture attention without requiring deep focus, and character voices that remain consistent throughout. This creates what sleep experts call a cognitive lullaby, where your brain can partially engage without becoming overstimulated. But here's where it gets really interesting. The show's creator, Seth MacFarlane, has actually acknowledged this unexpected use of his creation. In interviews, he's mentioned receiving countless messages from fans who use Family Guy episodes to fall asleep. What's fascinating is that this wasn't intentional, but it happened because of specific audio design choices made during production. The audio mixing in Family Guy is deliberately compressed, meaning the difference between the loudest and quietest sounds is minimized. This prevents jarring volume spikes that might wake you up. Unlike many other TV shows where dramatic music or sound effects can suddenly blast through your speakers, the voice acting also maintains a relatively steady pitch and tone, creating a consistent audio environment that's conducive to relaxation. Now let's talk about the science behind why repetitive content helps us sleep. When we watch the same episodes repeatedly, our brains start to predict what's coming next. This predictability reduces anxiety and mental stimulation, allowing our minds to gradually wind down. Family Guy episodes are structured in a way that supports this process, with familiar character, dynamics, and recurring gags that create a sense of security. The phenomenon has grown so large that entire YouTube channels are dedicated to Family Guy sleep compilations. These videos regularly rack up millions of views, with comment sections filled with people sharing their gratitude for finding the perfect sleep content. Some compilations run for 10, 12, even 15 hours, specifically designed to play throughout the entire night without interruption. What makes this even more remarkable is the demographic involved. While Family Guy's primary audience skews toward adults aged 18 to 49, the sleep community spans all age groups. Parents report using these compilations to help their children fall asleep, while elderly viewers have discovered that familiar voices and simple storylines provide comfort during restless nights. The cultural impact of this trend extends beyond just sleep habits. It's created a shared experience among viewers who might never meet but who all understand the comfort of falling asleep to Peter Griffin's voice. Social media groups dedicated to Family Guy sleep content have thousands of members who share their favorite episodes, discuss which seasons work best for sleeping, and even create custom playlists for different moods. But let's dive deeper into what makes Family Guy specifically effective compared to other animated shows. The key lies in its character consistency and emotional tone. Unlike shows with dramatic story arcs or intense emotional moments, Family Guy maintains a relatively flat emotional landscape. Even when conflicts arise, they're typically resolved quickly and without lasting consequences, preventing the kind of narrative tension that might keep your mind active. The show's humor style also plays a crucial role. The comedy is largely observational and referential, rather than building toward major punchlines that require your full attention. This allows viewers to drift in and out of consciousness without feeling like they're missing important plot points or set-up payoff sequences that other comedies rely on. Character voice consistency is another crucial factor. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple main characters, including Peter, Brian, and Stewie, creating a unified vocal landscape. His voice acting style maintains consistent energy levels and delivery patterns across different characters, contributing to the overall audio stability that makes the show suitable for sleep. The animation style itself supports the sleep-friendly nature of the content. Family Guy uses bright, primary colors and simple character designs that don't create visual complexity or overstimulation. The backgrounds are typically static, and camera movements are minimal compared to more action-oriented animated series. This visual simplicity prevents the kind of dynamic imagery that might keep viewers visually engaged when they're trying to relax. Research into sleep and media consumption has revealed some fascinating insights about why certain content works better than others for bedtime viewing. Studies show that familiar content reduces cortisol levels, the stress hormone that keeps us alert and awake. When we watch something we've seen before, our brains don't need to work as hard to process new information, allowing other systems to begin the shutdown process necessary for sleep. The episodic nature of Family Guy also supports healthy sleep habits. Unlike serialized dramas that create cliffhangers and emotional investment in ongoing storylines, Family Guy episodes are largely self-contained. This means viewers don't feel compelled to stay awake to find out what happens next, reducing the kind of narrative anxiety that can interfere with sleep onset. Temperature regulation during sleep is crucial, and surprisingly, the content we consume before bed can affect our body's ability to cool down. Family Guy's predictable pacing and familiar content help maintain steady heart rate and breathing patterns, supporting the natural temperature drop that signals our bodies it's time to sleep. The show's approach to conflict resolution also contributes to its sleep-friendly qualities. Most episodes follow a pattern where problems are introduced and resolved within 22 minutes, creating a sense of completion and closure that helps viewers feel satisfied and ready to rest. This is dramatically different from shows that end episodes with unresolved tension or dramatic cliffhangers. Cultural references and pop culture jokes in Family Guy serve an interesting function for sleep viewers. Because many of these references are repeated across multiple episodes and seasons, they create layers of familiarity that deepen over time. Longtime viewers develop an almost subliminal recognition of these patterns, further enhancing the comfort and predictability that supports sleep. The timing of cutaway gags is another element that works in favor of sleep viewers. These brief tangential scenes typically last between 10 to 30 seconds, providing just enough variety to prevent complete monotony while maintaining the overall flow of familiar content. They're short enough that viewers who drift off won't miss significant plot development, but engaging enough to provide gentle mental stimulation for those still partially awake. Voice acting quality and consistency across the series is remarkable when you consider that Family Guy has been in production for over 20 years. The main voice actors have maintained their character voices with impressive consistency, creating an audio signature that remains recognizable and comforting across different seasons and episodes. This vocal stability is crucial for sleep content, as changes in voice quality or delivery style could be jarring enough to wake viewers. The show's musical approach also supports its effectiveness as sleep content. The background music is typically understated and doesn't compete with dialogue for attention. Musical cues are predictable and rarely feature sudden volume changes or jarring instrumental choices that might disrupt the relaxation process. Even the show's musical numbers, while entertaining, follow familiar structures that don't create unexpected audio experiences. Character development in Family Guy follows patterns that support its use as sleep content. Unlike shows where characters undergo significant growth or change, Family Guy characters remain relatively static in their personalities and behaviors. This consistency means viewers always know what to expect from each character, reducing the cognitive load required to follow character arcs or relationship developments. The pacing of dialogue delivery is another crucial element. Family Guy conversations typically maintain steady rhythms, without the rapid-fire exchanges or dramatic pauses that characterize other comedy series. This consistent pacing helps maintain the audio environment that many viewers find conducive to sleep, providing gentle stimulation without sudden changes that might increase alertness. Production quality across different seasons has remained remarkably consistent, which is important for viewers who cycle through multiple episodes during sleep sessions. While animation techniques have evolved over the years, the core audio elements that make Family Guy effective for sleep have remained stable throughout the series' run. The global appeal of Family Guy as sleep content transcends cultural boundaries. International viewers report similar experiences with the show's sleep-inducing properties, even when watching dubbed versions in their native languages. This suggests that the fundamental structural elements that make the show effective for sleep are independent of specific cultural references or language-based humor. Streaming platform algorithms have recognized this usage pattern and now actively recommend Family Guy content to viewers who consume other sleep-related media. This has created a feedback loop, where the show's sleep community continues to grow as more people discover its effectiveness through algorithmic suggestions. The economic impact of this trend is substantial. Streaming services have reported that Family Guy episodes generate billions of hours of viewing time, with a significant portion of that consumption happening during typical sleep hours. This has influenced licensing decisions and content acquisition strategies across multiple platforms. Medical professionals have begun studying the Family Guy sleep phenomenon as part of broader research into media-assisted sleep techniques. While not officially prescribed as a sleep aid, some sleep specialists acknowledge that for certain individuals, familiar comedic content can be part of a healthy bedtime routine when used appropriately. The community aspect of Family Guy sleep culture has created unique social connections. Online forums feature discussions about optimal episode selections, volume levels, and viewing setups specifically designed for sleep use. These communities provide support and advice for people struggling with insomnia or other sleep difficulties. Production decisions made decades ago continue to influence the show's effectiveness as sleep content today. Early episodes featured simpler audio mixing and more straightforward storylines that many sleep viewers prefer. This has led to interesting discussions about which seasons and episodes work best for different types of sleep needs. The psychological comfort provided by Family Guy's dysfunctional but ultimately loving family dynamic resonates with viewers seeking emotional stability before sleep. Despite the characters' many flaws and conflicts, the show consistently reinforces themes of family loyalty and unconditional acceptance that can provide emotional security during vulnerable sleep periods. As we wrap up this exploration of Family Guy's unexpected role as the internet's favorite sleep aid, It's clear that this phenomenon represents something much larger than just a quirky viewing habit. It demonstrates how content creators can accidentally tap into deep psychological needs, how communities form around shared experiences, and how familiar media can provide comfort in our increasingly chaotic world. Whether you're a longtime member of the Family Guy sleep community or someone who's never considered using animated sitcoms as a relaxation tool, this trend offers fascinating insights into human psychology, media consumption, and the unexpected ways we find peace in our daily lives. The next time you're struggling to fall asleep, you might want to give those Family Guy compilations a try. You'll be joining millions of viewers who have discovered that sometimes the best lullaby comes from the most unexpected source, and you might just find yourself sleeping better than you have in years. Have you ever wondered what happens when celebrities get roasted so hard by Family Guy that they actually fight back? Tonight, we're diving into the wild world of bruised egos, angry tweets, and even courtroom drama. Some of these reactions will shock you, others might make you laugh, but all of them prove that not everyone can take a joke when Seth MacFarlane comes calling. Picture this. You're an Oscar-winning actor at the top of your game, and suddenly millions of people are watching an animated dog make fun of your nose. That's exactly what happened to Adrien Brody. And let me tell you, he did not find it amusing. During a murder mystery episode where characters are getting picked off one by one, Tom Tucker gets cornered by the other guests who think he's the killer. When they finally take him down, someone delivers this brutal line about casting Brody in a movie adaptation, basically saying nobody would want to watch it. But Family Guy wasn't finished with poor Adrien yet. They doubled down with another scene featuring Meg on a date watching a 3D movie. What's playing on screen? Adrien Brody doing shirtless sit-ups, and his famously prominent nose literally pokes out of the screen in full three-dimensional glory. It's the kind of visual gag that makes you cringe and laugh at the same time. So, how did the Academy Award winner handle being the butt of these jokes? Not gracefully. According to Seth MacFarlane himself, in interviews, Seth revealed that when he approached Brody at a Hollywood party to smooth things over, mentioning how much he enjoyed one of Brody's films, the actor made it crystal clear that there were definitely hard feelings. No amount of compliments about his work could undo the sting of those animated jabs. This brings us to our next celebrity casualty, and this one gets really messy because it involves politics and personal family matters. Sarah Palin found herself in Family Guy's crosshairs during an episode where Chris goes on a date with a girl who has Down syndrome. During their dinner conversation, the girl casually mentions her family background, specifically that her mother used to be the governor of Alaska. Now, unless there's another former Alaskan governor out there with a child named Ellen, this was clearly aimed at Sarah Palin and her family situation. The timing made this particularly sensitive because Palin's son, who has Down syndrome, was only 2 years old at the time. The Palin family's reaction was swift and fierce. Sarah took to social media calling Family Guy a pathetic cartoon and labeling the creators heartless jerks. But she didn't stop there. She appeared on television talk shows, describing the writers as cruel and cold-hearted people who had crossed a line by making jokes about the disabled community. Family Guy fired back through Seth MacFarlane, who pointed out something interesting during his own television appearance. The character making those comments was actually voiced by Andrea Friedman, an actress who herself has Down syndrome. This actress later clarified that she felt the joke was directed at Sarah Palin personally, not at people with disabilities, and she even suggested that Palin simply didn't have a sense of humor about the situation. But sometimes Family Guy doesn't even need to directly target someone to cause controversy. Chloe Grace Moretz learned this the hard way when she became collateral damage in an internet phenomenon. During an episode where Peter decides to lose weight so he can ride a roller coaster, he sets his sights on looking as good as a character called Legs Go All the Way Up Griffin. This character was basically a visual gag. All legs with no torso. The joke itself had nothing to do with Moretz, but someone online photoshopped her picture to match this character design, and the image went viral across social media platforms. While the internet found it hilarious, Moretz definitely didn't. She publicly stated that this manipulated image seriously affected her body image and self-confidence, causing her to retreat from public appearances for a while. The cruel irony is that Family Guy never even mentioned her name, but she still got caught in the crossfire of internet culture. Speaking of crossing lines, Family Guy once ventured into territory so sensitive that it sparked outrage from disability advocates, religious groups, and grieving family members alike. They decided to create a school play episode featuring Terry Schiavo, the woman who became the center of one of America's most heartbreaking right-to-die legal battles. In typical Family Guy fashion, they turned this tragic real-life situation into a musical number performed by preschoolers. The kids sang cheerful songs with lyrics comparing Schiavo to an expensive plant that should just be unplugged. Even within the show, Brian questioned whether it was too soon for such material. But that didn't stop the episode from airing. The backlash was immediate and intense. Terry's own brother, Bobby Schindler Jr., was so furious about what he saw as insensitive treatment of his family's tragedy that he actually called for Fox to cancel Family Guy entirely. Religious groups and disability advocates joined the chorus of criticism, arguing that some subjects should be off-limits, even for satirical comedy. Now, getting roasted by Family Guy hits different when you're a comedian yourself. Rachel Bloom, creator and star of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, discovered this firsthand during an episode where Brian impulsively marries a woman with cancer. The storyline gets complicated when the woman's cancer goes into remission, leaving Brian stuck in a marriage he never really wanted. To make matters worse for Brian, his new wife gains weight, develops some unpleasant habits, and constantly gushes about her favorite television show. That's where Family Guy took their shot at Bloom's creation, having the character describe Crazy Ex-Girlfriend in dismissive terms, focusing on a musical number about menstruation, and suggesting that watching such shows makes someone unattractive and unlikable. Bloom's reaction was more nuanced than outright fury, but she definitely wasn't laughing. She pointed out that the scene reeked of male condescension, essentially equating appreciation for her show with being an undesirable woman. While she didn't launch a full-scale public campaign against Family Guy, her response made it clear that she felt the jab was rooted in sexist assumptions about female-created content. Sometimes, though, celebrities handle Family Guy roasts with unexpected maturity. Dax Shepard found himself on the receiving end of a quick but cutting intelligence joke during an episode where Brian discovers he has a brain tumor. When the family learns the tumor is benign and debates whether Brian should have surgery, someone quips about whether Dax Shepard turned out all right, clearly questioning his intelligence. Rather than ranting on social media or giving angry interviews, Shepard took a different approach. He brought up the joke directly with Seth MacFarlane during an appearance on his own podcast. He acknowledged that he understood the writers weren't trying to be malicious and recognized the nuanced nature of comedy, but he was honest about the fact that it still stung a little. This mature, direct conversation probably earned him more respect than any angry response could have. One of the most interesting cases involves James Woods, who went from being Family Guy's most willing participant to eventually walking away from the show entirely. For years, Woods not only tolerated being parodied but actively participated, voicing an exaggerated version of himself in multiple episodes. He played up his persona as a chaotic, scheming character who would steal identities, fake his own death, and constantly torment the Griffin family. Woods initially embraced the self-parody, even refusing payment because he genuinely enjoyed making fun of himself. This collaboration worked brilliantly for both parties, giving Family Guy a celebrity who was game for anything while allowing Woods to show his sense of humor. But by 2018, something changed. Woods became more politically vocal on social media, and when Family Guy offered him another episode, he turned it down. He tweeted that he felt the new material was too politically biased, and worse than being offensive, it simply wasn't funny anymore. He accused the show of becoming mean-spirited rather than genuinely comedic. After that public criticism, Woods disappeared from Family Guy entirely, marking the end of one of their most successful celebrity partnerships. The most extreme legal response came from Carol Burnett, who decided that if Family Guy was going to use her intellectual property, she was going. to make them pay for it literally. The controversy stemmed from a brief scene where Quagmire visits an adult bookstore, and viewers catch a glimpse of Burnett's iconic charwoman character from her classic sketch show working as a janitor. The appearance lasted maybe 2 seconds and seemed relatively harmless by Family Guy standards, but Burnett saw it as a serious violation of her rights. She filed a lawsuit against Fox, claiming copyright infringement and misuse of her character without permission. She wasn't seeking a small settlement either. Reports indicated she wanted somewhere between $2 and $6 million in damages. The legal system didn't side with Burnett, however. Judge Dean Pregerson dismissed the case, ruling that Family Guy was protected under First Amendment parody provisions. Interestingly, though, the judge did note that while the show was legally protected, he found the scene distasteful and offensive to Burnett personally. So while she didn't win any money, she did get judicial acknowledgement that her feelings were valid. These reactions reveal something fascinating about celebrity culture and comedy boundaries. Some stars, like Dax Shepard and initially James Woods, showed they could laugh at themselves and engage constructively with satirical content. Others, like Adrian Brody and Sarah Palin, felt genuinely hurt and responded with public criticism. Still, others like Carol Burnett saw legal violations that needed addressing through the court system. What makes Family Guy's celebrity controversies particularly interesting is how they reflect broader conversations about comedy, free speech, and personal dignity in the digital age. When a show has millions of viewers and endless social media amplification, even a brief joke can follow someone around for years. The internet's ability to turn a 2-second gag into a viral meme, as happened with Chloe Grace Moretz, demonstrates how modern comedy can have unintended consequences. The show's approach to sensitive topics like disability, terminal illness, and personal tragedy also raises questions about whether any subject should be off-limits for satirical treatment. The Terry Schiavo episode particularly highlighted this tension, with critics arguing that some real-life situations are too painful and recent for comedic treatment, while others defend the right to satirize any public figure or event. From a psychological perspective, these celebrity reactions also reveal how public figures cope with being reduced to punchlines. Adrian Brody's continued resentment suggests that some people never fully recover from being mocked on such a large scale, especially when the jokes focus on physical characteristics they cannot change. Sarah Palin's fierce defense of her family shows how comedy can become deeply personal when it touches on sensitive family matters. The gender dynamics in some of these controversies are also worth examining. Rachel Bloom's observation about male condescension in comedy writing reflects broader conversations about how female creators and their work get treated in predominantly male-dominated comedy spaces. Her measured but critical response showed how women in entertainment often have to balance standing up for themselves while avoiding being labeled as humorless or overly sensitive. James Woods' evolution from enthusiastic participant to critic illustrates how political polarization can affect entertainment relationships. His willingness to mock himself disappeared when he felt the show's political perspective diverged too far from his own beliefs, suggesting that even self-deprecating humor has limits when it conflicts with personal values. The legal aspects, particularly Carol Burnett's lawsuit, highlight the complex intersection between parody rights and intellectual property protection. While courts generally protect satirical content under free speech provisions, celebrities still have legitimate concerns about how their likenesses and creations get used without permission, especially in commercial contexts. These stories also demonstrate the power dynamics between individual celebrities and large entertainment corporations. When Family Guy makes a joke, it has the backing of major networks and widespread distribution, while individual celebrities often have limited recourse beyond public statements or legal action. This imbalance can make satirical attacks feel particularly unfair to those being targeted. The internet's role in amplifying these controversies cannot be overlooked. Social media platforms allow both celebrities to respond directly to perceived slights and fans to create additional content that extends the original jokes in unexpected directions. Chloe Grace Moretz's experience shows how online communities can take a television gag and transform it into something more personally damaging than the original creators intended. Looking at the long-term impact of these controversies, It's clear that some celebrities never fully recover their relationship with Family Guy or its fan base. Adrian Brody's continued resentment years later suggests that animated mockery can create lasting professional and personal damage. Other celebrities like Dax Shepard seem to have moved on more successfully by addressing the situation directly and maturely. The varying reactions also reflect different approaches to celebrity image management in the digital age. Some stars try to ignore satirical attacks, hoping they'll fade away naturally. Others engage directly, either through humor or criticism. Still others pursue legal remedies when they feel their rights have been violated. None of these approaches seems universally successful, suggesting that there's no perfect way to handle being satirized by popular media. These celebrity feuds with Family Guy ultimately reveal the complex relationship between comedy, fame, and personal dignity in contemporary entertainment. While satirical shows claim the right to mock public figures, those figures retain the right to respond, criticize, and seek legal remedies when they feel boundaries have been crossed. The ongoing debates about these controversies suggest that society is still figuring out the appropriate balance between comedic freedom and personal respect. As entertainment becomes more personalized and social media makes everyone more accessible, these questions will likely become even more complicated. Whether you think these celebrities were justified in their reactions or believe they should have just laughed it off, one thing is clear. Family Guy's willingness to target anyone and everyone has created a fascinating collection of bruised egos and public feuds that continues to spark conversation about the limits and responsibilities of satirical comedy. Want to dive deeper into Family Guy controversies and see why so many people are calling for the show to be canceled entirely? Check out our next video exploring the growing backlash against the series and whether all this controversy is finally catching up with Seth MacFarlane's creation. You know that feeling when you're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone at 2 a.m, and you just need something to help your brain wind down? Well, tonight we're diving into the wonderfully weird world of Family Guy with some absolutely random facts that'll either put you to sleep or keep you up wondering how Seth MacFarlane's mind actually works. So grab your pillow, get comfortable, and let's explore the bizarre universe of Quahog together. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice? The show first got the axe in 2002 after just 3 seasons. But something incredible happened that brought it back from the dead. Adult Swim started airing reruns, and the show's popularity exploded like Peter Griffin trying to open a jar of pickles. The DVD sales went through the roof, and suddenly Fox realized they'd made a massive mistake. So in 2005, Family Guy came back from cancellation, making it one of the very few shows in television history to pull off this resurrection trick twice. Speaking of resurrections, here's something that might surprise you about Brian Griffin's voice. Seth MacFarlane, who voices the intellectual dog, actually based Brian's sophisticated accent and mannerisms on his own personality. MacFarlane has said in interviews that Brian is essentially his voice in the show, which explains why the dog often serves as the voice of reason, at least when he's not having his own ridiculous adventures. It's almost like MacFarlane created his own animated alter ego to comment on the chaos around him. Now here's a fact that'll make you appreciate the show's attention to detail, even in its most absurd moments. The Griffin family's address is 31 Spooner Street, and this isn't just a random number pulled out of thin air. The address is actually a reference to the street where one of the show's early writers lived. But what's even more interesting is that if you look carefully at episodes throughout the series, you'll notice that the layout of the Griffin house has changed multiple times. Sometimes there are different numbers of windows, the staircase moves around, and rooms appear and disappear like they're in some kind of cartoon physics experiment. Let's talk about Stewie Griffin for a moment, because this character has one of the most fascinating evolution arcs in animated television. In the early seasons, Stewie was genuinely diabolical, plotting to kill his mother Lois and take over the world with elaborate schemes that would make a Bond villain jealous. But as the series progressed, the writers gradually shifted his character from evil mastermind to sophisticated, cultured, and eventually openly exploring his sexuality. Seth MacFarlane has mentioned that this evolution happened naturally as they discovered what made the character funnier and more relatable. Here's something that might blow your mind about the show's production process. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 10 months to complete, from start to finish. That means when you're watching a new episode, the writers were working on it almost a year ago. This lengthy production timeline is part of why the show sometimes feels like it's commenting on events that happened ages ago, but it also explains the incredible attention to detail in the animation and voice work. Did you know that the famous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken weren't originally planned to become a recurring gag? The first chicken fight appeared in a Season 1 episode as a quick throwaway joke, but it became so popular with fans that the writers kept bringing it back, each time making the fights longer and more elaborate. These sequences have become some of the most expensive and time-consuming parts of the show to animate, sometimes taking up several minutes of screen time with incredibly detailed action sequences. Speaking of expensive sequences, the show's cutaway gags, those random flashbacks that interrupt the main story, were actually inspired by classic comedy shows like The Carol Burnett Show. Seth MacFarlane wanted to recreate that feeling of sketches within a larger show, but he took it to the extreme by making the cutaways completely disconnected from the main plot. Some of these gags have become so iconic that they've spawned their own merchandise and internet memes. Here's a heartwarming fact about the show's impact on real families. Despite all the dysfunction and chaos of the Griffin family, many real families have said that watching Family Guy together has actually brought them closer. There's something about laughing at Peter's ridiculous antics that makes your own family's problems seem manageable in comparison. The show has become a bonding experience for parents and older children who can appreciate the humor together. Let's dive into some voice acting trivia that'll make you listen to the characters differently. Mila Kunis, who voices Meg Griffin, was only 14 years old when she started on the show. She actually lied about her age during the audition process, and by the time the producers found out how young she really was, they were so impressed with her work that they kept her on. She's been voicing Meg for over 20 years now, which means she's literally grown up with the character. Here's something interesting about the show's relationship with censorship. While Family Guy pushes boundaries constantly, there are actually several episodes that have never aired on television due to content issues. These episodes exist in various forms, sometimes appearing on DVD releases or streaming platforms with heavy warnings. The writers often create content knowing it might be too controversial for broadcast, almost as a creative challenge to see how far they can push the envelope. The character of Cleveland Brown was so popular that he got his own spin-off show. But here's something you might not know about that decision. The Cleveland show was partly created because Mike Henry, who voices Cleveland, wanted to explore what it would be like to have an animated show centered around an African-American family. While the spin-off only lasted 4 seasons, it allowed the writers to tackle different types of stories and social issues than they could in Family Guy. Did you know that several major celebrities have turned down guest appearances on Family Guy because they felt the show was too controversial? But for every celebrity who said no, there were dozens who said yes, often because they were fans of the show themselves. Some of the most surprising guest stars have been people you'd never expect to appear on an adult animated comedy, including several politicians and news anchors who were willing to make fun of themselves. Here's a production fact that shows how much work goes into creating the show's signature style. The animators use a specific color palette that's deliberately muted compared to other animated shows. This choice was made to give Family Guy a slightly more realistic feel, even though the content is completely absurd. The character designs are also intentionally simple, which allows the animators to focus on facial expressions and body language that enhance the comedy. Let's talk about the show's impact on internet culture. Family Guy was one of the first television shows to really embrace social media and online fan communities. The writers regularly read fan feedback and sometimes incorporate popular fan theories or suggestions into actual episodes. This interaction between creators and fans was revolutionary for television at the time and has influenced how many other shows approach their online presence. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's educational value. Despite its reputation for crude humor, Family Guy has actually introduced many viewers to classical music, literature, and historical references they might never have encountered otherwise. The show's cutaway gags often reference everything from Shakespeare to classical composers, and many fans have said they discovered new interests because of jokes they didn't initially understand. The relationship between Family Guy and The Simpsons has always been interesting, especially since both shows air on the same network. There have been several crossover episodes and references between the shows, but there's also been some friendly rivalry. Seth MacFarlane has always acknowledged The Simpsons as a major influence, but he's also tried to carve out a distinct identity for Family Guy that sets it apart from Matt Groening's creation. Here's a fact about the show's international reach that might surprise you. Family Guy has been translated into dozens of languages and adapted for different cultures around the world. In some countries, certain jokes have to be completely rewritten because the original references don't translate culturally. This has led to some interesting variations where different versions of the same episode can have completely different gags while maintaining the same basic story structure. Did you know that several episodes of Family Guy have been turned into stage productions? There have been live performances of selected episodes at various comedy festivals, with voice actors performing their roles on stage while animation plays in the background. These performances have given fans a unique way to experience the show and have shown how well the writing works, even without the visual component. The show's theme song, which seems simple enough, actually went through multiple versions before the creators settled on the current one. The original pilot had a completely different opening sequence, and there have been several special versions created for holiday episodes and milestone celebrations. The song has become so iconic that it's been covered by numerous bands and has appeared in various other media as a cultural reference. Point. Here's something about the writing process that shows how collaborative the show really is. While Seth MacFarlane created the show and voices several main characters, the writing staff includes dozens of people who contribute jokes, storylines, and character development. Some of the funniest gags in the show come from writers who might never be credited on screen, but whose contributions are essential to the show's success. Let's talk about how Family Guy handles continuity, or rather, how it completely ignores it when convenient. Characters die and come back to life. Relationships change from episode to episode, and major life events are forgotten or contradicted regularly. This approach to storytelling was initially criticized by some viewers who expected more consistency, but it's actually become one of the show's defining characteristics, allowing for maximum creative freedom. The merchandising empire built around Family Guy is absolutely massive, including everything from action figures to clothing to home decor items featuring the characters. But here's something interesting. Some of the most popular merchandise features quotes and images from the most controversial episodes, suggesting that fans embrace the show's boundary-pushing content rather than shy away from it. Finally, here's a fact that brings us full circle to why Family Guy works so well as late-night viewing. The show's creators have always understood that comedy is often about timing and rhythm, and they've structured episodes to have natural peaks and valleys of energy. This makes it perfect for falling asleep to, because your brain can follow the familiar patterns even as you drift off, and the comfort of recognizing character voices and running gags creates a soothing background that helps many people relax. As you settle in for sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, there are animators working on new Family Guy episodes that won't air for almost a year, writers brainstorming increasingly ridiculous scenarios for Peter to stumble into, and voice actors bringing these beloved characters to life. The world of Quahog continues to evolve and surprise us, proving that even after more than 20 years, there are still new stories to tell and new ways to make us laugh at the beautiful absurdity of it all. Sweet dreams, and may your subconscious be filled with talking dogs, evil babies, and the gentle chaos of the Griffin family household.